Imagine waking to a voicemail that erases 15 years of your life's work in under a minute. I'm Emma, and last week my family, my own mother and sister, cut me out of our company with a cold, calculated message. No warning, no explanation, just betrayal. What would you do if those closest to you tried to silence your legacy? Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. This story of deception and defiance will grip you. Just as I parked in front of the office in downtown Denver, my phone buzzed sharply, a single notification signaling the end of my trust. One number, one message, one blunt sound marking the collapse of 15 years of commitment. I put on my headphones. In that moment, I naively assumed it was another routine favor. "Emma, can you review the next quarter's plan?" Or, "Emma, would you join me for a meeting with an investor next week?" But her voice this time was entirely different. "Emma," my mother began, her tone flat and emotionless. "No, sweetheart," not a trace of warmth. "Your father, your sister, and I have agreed to restructure the company. Effective last week, you are no longer part of the executive team. We'll be buying out your shares. Our family lawyer will be in touch. We wish you all the best." The message ended in chilling silence. I sat frozen, gripping my car keys so tightly my knuckles turned white. My resolve hardened. Their betrayal now a catalyst for my counterstrike. No explanation, no meeting, no warning. They crossed my name off the company as if I were an unqualified intern, not the chief operating officer holding 35% ownership. It wasn't until 8:10 that I replied with a short message. Just one word. Understood. No rage, no begging, just a cold closure, perfectly mirroring how they had chosen to dismiss me. I didn't go into the office that day. Instead, I drove straight to Boulder to the estate lawyer I had met 2 years prior when handling my grandfather's will. I needed someone who understood the company's history, someone who had witnessed the original ownership split, my father with 40%, my mother with 25%, and me with 35%. My sister Clara had never held any shares, but always acted like she ruled every decision. The lawyer peered at me through his thin-rimmed glasses and asked slowly, "Are you absolutely sure? Once you begin the process of selling your stake, there's no turning back." I nodded, not a hint of hesitation. They thought I'd cry, pound on their door, beg? No. They underestimated the very person they had labeled good with numbers but lacking vision. I didn't say anything aloud, but in my mind I whispered, "Fine, if you want me gone, I'll leave." But not empty-handed, and certainly not quietly. Initiated the sale, my strategy a silent vow to reclaim my worth. My lawyer would find a suitable buyer, not out of revenge but to make them face the consequences of the very decision they had made. 15 years of tireless work. 6 times I used my personal savings to keep cash flow afloat. 3 job offers from major corporations I turned down out of loyalty to my father, and now it was all swept away by a voicemail under 1 minute long. I walked out of the law office into the light rain of Denver. Their dismissal fueled my determination to expose their deceit. Their betrayal didn't shock me. It was simply the final blow in a long string of quiet slaps I had trained myself to ignore. Not anymore. Back home, I powered up my laptop and started cleaning house, not my wardrobe, but financial records, data, and memory. And I prepared for the next step, selling what I owned, number by number, legally, accurately, and on my terms. I started working for the family company at 18, right after graduating high school in Boulder. I dove into the company's ledgers, uncovering inefficiencies that saved millions over years. Back then, my father told me something I've never forgotten. If you want to prove you're not just the spoiled youngest daughter, start by working like everyone else. I worked unpaid for the first 2 years. By year 3, I received a modest stipend, just enough to cover rent and tuition, but I never complained. I believed what I was building was a solid future in a legacy my grandfather, the company's founder, had built from the ground up. My father stepped down from operations when I turned 23. My mother, Elaine, took over as CEO, and Clara, my sister, 5 years older, who studied communications in California and never worked a full week in any plant, was suddenly made head of public affairs. When I asked why, my mother said, "Clara has the face for it. You're great with numbers, so the accounting office is where you belong." I nodded, even as those words sliced something deep inside me. When the main plant in Fort Collins experienced a production line failure that led to a massive return of orders, I was the one who stayed up until 3 o'clock IE rechecking the entire payment system. I uncovered nearly $350,000, 0 cents, in losses due to pricing errors. I presented my findings and proposed a cash flow restructuring. Result: the company recovered from its debt backlog within 3 months. Clara later held a press conference and told reporters, "Our family executed a bold and strategic turnaround. She stole my victory, her smile a mask for her theft." That fall, when I was 27, we had a chance to open another facility in Wyoming. The initial investment required more than $450,000, 0 cents. My mother and Clara believed securing a bank loan was the best route, but the loan application was denied. The company's reputation had recently been hit due to faulty products, so I emptied nearly all my savings, over $130,000, 0 cents, and used property under my name as collateral to qualify for an advance from the equipment supplier. I didn't do it to be the hero. I did it because I thought if I don't step in, the company will fall into the hands of outside investors and will lose control of our family legacy. We pulled through, but the moment the plant was running smoothly, my mother handed over financial oversight to an external consulting firm, Clara said. "She did well, but we need to professionalize to grow." I didn't argue. I quietly retreated into managing cash flow and preparing tax flow. Everything I had sacrificed, money, time, youth, even chances at my own career growth, gradually became expected. When I raised concerns in meetings, my mother would sigh, "Ah, Emma, don't complicate things again." Clara would chuckle. Her mockery stung, but it sharpened my focus to outmaneuver them. I became used to being interrupted mid-sentence, excluded from critical emails, or seated at the overflow table during strategic partner meetings. They called me the ledger girl, as if my only role was to add and subtract. Once I warned of cash flow risks in a contract with an uncertified ISO contractor. Clara laughed, patted my shoulder in front of everyone, and said, "You worry too much, trust me." 3 months later, that very contract cost the company nearly $80,000, 0 cents in returned inventory. No one apologized, no one remembered my warning. I began to understand. In their eyes, I wasn't a partner. I was the fallback plan, a walking bank account with a polite voice. Their disregard became my blueprint for retribution. I discovered everything on a regular Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at my usual coffee shop near home, editing the draft of the quarterly tax report. Even though I had officially been removed from management a few weeks earlier, old habits die hard. I still kept up with industry news, still reviewed bits of data I had access to from the accounting system. Their oversight in leaving my access open was their fatal mistake. While taking a break, I absent-mindedly opened LinkedIn, and then, buried among product announcements, job postings, and internal industry news, a post appeared that made my chest tighten. Clara stood next to a man I'd never seen before. The two of them were shaking hands in front of a large backdrop with our company's logo. The caption was short but cutting. "Welcoming Mr. Nathan Brooks to the Harrington manufacturing family, a new chapter for clean manufacturing in the Rocky Mountain region." Nathan Brooks, a CEO known for leading a private equity firm infamous for gutting and flipping struggling family-owned companies. I read that caption over and over, not a single mention of me, not one word acknowledging that this company once had a shareholder named Emma Harrington holding 35%. Part of my grandfather's legacy. Their erasure of me ignited my resolve to fight back. They had planned to push me out long ago, they just needed me to stay quiet. And I had done exactly that, until they believed they could erase me completely from the story. I called my mother right after. "Oh, that," she said, her tone dismissive, like I had just asked if she went grocery shopping. "We meant to tell you, but everything happened so fast." "This is a major strategic partner," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It directly affects ownership structure and the value of my shares. Why wasn't there a meeting? Not even an email. A phone call. She paused for a few seconds, then delivered her response. Her words were a calculated jab, underestimating my strength. You're not there every day anymore. We didn't think you'd fully understand the complexities of this deal. I gave a dry laugh. You mean I'm not qualified? I mean, you stepped back, Emma. You can't expect to pull away and still have a say. Her voice was syrupy sweet and sharper than any knife. Then Clara joined the call. Her smug tone revealed their coordinated betrayal. We only signed with Nathan to take the company to the next level, Clara said. Nobody intentionally excluded you, but honestly, Emma, you're good at the small stuff. Accounting systems, paperwork, the little things. This is a global strategy. You'll see everything turns out fine. Don't blow this out of proportion. I ended the call, not out of anger, but because I knew one more word and I wouldn't be able to hold it together. I didn't want them to see me crack. I wanted them to see silence. And this would be the kind of silence that wasn't passive, but calculated. That night, I dug out every financial document from the past 6 years. Every time I transferred personal money into the company's accounts to cover payroll during a slow season, the emergency contracts signed because I was the only one willing to guarantee them. I never kept those to claim credit, but now, every word, every number, every receipt had become undeniable proof of one thing. I was never on the outside. I had never been just extra. And if they chose to operate behind my back, then I would respond with the very thing they overlooked. Data precise and irrefutable. There were no tears, no angry phone calls, and definitely no pleading. I knew that any emotional response would only serve the tired narrative my mother and Clara always leaned on. Emma is too emotional. She's not built for high-level decisions. Instead, I opened my laptop and retrieved a file I'd been subconsciously compiling for years, something I now realized was priceless. A complete archive of the financial work I had done for the company. No one asked me to keep that handwritten contract with the supplier who once threatened to sue us over late payments. No one knew I had screenshots of every bank transfer, every off-the-record email asking me to cover a short-term loan for the Wyoming facility, but I kept them. Each file was a weapon, ready to dismantle their lies. I called an old friend, Lucas Bennett, a business attorney in Boulder, who once helped me navigate my grandfather's estate. He wasn't the type for comforting words, but when I finished explaining, he said only one sentence. Emma, they messed with the wrong person. We got to work immediately, Lucas emphasized. If they wanted to buy me out, they'd have to follow the proper process. And if they signed with a third party without my consent, as the second largest shareholder, they were in violation of multiple operating rules. I began auditing every contribution I had made over the past 10 years, not just cash transfers, but the loans in my name, the taxes I covered, the vendor contracts I signed when my mother and Clara were too busy with conferences. Everything had a paper trail, timestamps, originals, confirmations. 3 days later, Lucas's office issued an official notice to the company. I was rejecting any forced buyout and demanding full transparency regarding the deal with Nathan Brooks for all shareholders. I wasn't surprised when the response was absolute silence. Lucas simply smirked. Their silence confirmed their guilt, paving the way for my next move. We moved forward with Plan B, finding an outside investor to acquire my 35% stake, but not at the bargain price my mother and Clara had hoped for. This time it would be on my terms and for the real value I knew better than anyone. Lucas contacted a Phoenix-based private equity group known for resolving family business disputes. They didn't care about bloodlines, only the balance sheet and potential return. I prepared a comprehensive file, my financial contributions, proof of my role during past crises, a legal risk summary showing what would happen if the other shareholders continued to violate the company charter, and a full account of the systemic exclusion I had endured for over a decade. When the investors finished reading, they asked just one question. Are you ready to sign the sale agreement as soon as it's legally permitted? I nodded. Then, on a Wednesday morning, as I was making coffee in my small apartment overlooking Cherry Creek, Lucas called. "They've agreed," he said. "The investors will buy 35% of your shares. The full payment will be wired into escrow within 72 hours of signing." I set the cup down. My strategy was unfolding. Their control slipping away. I hadn't chosen the fight they expected. I chose the game I controlled. 3 weeks after we submitted the initial legal request, Lucas and I sat in a private conference room on the 19th floor of a downtown Denver high-rise. Across the table were 3 representatives from Peak Pulse Partners, a well-known fund that specializes in stepping into fractured family businesses, especially when personal emotion clouds business judgment. They didn't ask why I wanted out. They cared about 2 things: numbers and legal risk. I had both in hand. I opened the binder and walked them through every investment I made in the company, every time I played financial backstop, every critical decision I helped steer, even though my only official title was the younger sister who's good with numbers. By page 16, one of the 3, Ms. Carter, a senior advisor, looked up at me. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was 18, I said. "Started in the records room, moved into finance 2 years later." She nodded slowly, sharp eyes, but not unkind. "And how much of that work was formally compensated in salary or dividends?" I gave a small smile. "Very little." But I kept receipts, every transaction, documentation, signatures, and emails. Their nods signaled respect, validating my years of unseen work. Less than 24 hours later, Lucas received the approval email. Peak Pulse would acquire my 35% for nearly double what my mother and Clara had quietly tried to negotiate through their lawyer. A video call was held the next day to finalize terms. My calm demeanor masked the triumph of outsmarting their scheme. But I was the one with signing authority that day, and I used it. The following Monday morning, I walked into Lucas's law office. My steps were steady, each one a defiance of their betrayal. In the conference room, the documents were neatly arranged. Each page bore the seals of both parties. Seller Emma Harrington, buyer Peak Pulse Partners. I picked up the pen and signed page by page, not too fast, not too slow. I read every clause, benefits, obligations, and the terms of the stake transfer, which would be disclosed to the company within 48 hours. Each signature was a nail in their coffin, sealing their fate. "And I signed the final page," Lucas murmured. "That's it." I looked at him and nodded. "From now on," he said, "they can't call you an outsider anymore. Not because you belong, but because you just walked away with all the power they never thought you'd use." 48 hours after I signed the equity transfer to Peak Pulse, their managing director, Ms. Carter, sent an official notice to Harrington Manufacturing's leadership board. In the letter, she declared that the fund was now a strategic stakeholder with 35% ownership and would be initiating a 2-week comprehensive audit effective immediately. I heard nothing the first day, but by the second morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Their frantic calls betrayed their panic, my silence their punishment. I didn't pick up. I didn't reply. I sat in my small apartment, played soft music, and continued my new freelance operations consulting work. I had a life of my own now, no longer shackled to phony family dinners or board meetings where I was only there to take notes. Then, around 2 p.m., an unknown number popped up, and instinct told me to answer. The voice on the line was shaky, rushed. "Emma, it's Mom." I stayed silent. "I know you sold your shares, but they're freezing everything, Emma. They want 5 years of financial records. They're questioning the investment flows for the new plant, the contract with Nathan, even the undisclosed loans not reported to shareholders." I kept my tone even. "Then just cooperate. They're only doing what responsible stakeholders do." She paused, then lowered her voice, nervous, pleading. "You can help, right? You still have backups of the reports you did if you could just tell them." I cut in gently. "You used to say I didn't understand the complex layers of the company, that I was just the one who crunched numbers. You wanted me out, and you got it. Now you and Clara can handle the strategic stuff you're so good at." 2 hours later, Clara called. I answered not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to hear how the face of the company would handle the spotlight turning against her. "Emma, you're destroying everything." Clara nearly hissed. "They're not who you think they are." "They're not here to help, they're tearing everything apart, you have to call them," I interrupted, my voice cool, even slightly amused. "Why not use that global strategic vision of yours to negotiate?" Their desperation was my vindication, their empire crumbling. I sighed. "Clara, you always said I only handled minor tasks. Don't dump major ones on me now." And I ended the call again. At exactly 8:00 p.m., Lucas sent me the initial scan from Peak Pulse's preliminary review. They listed nearly 14 irregularities in Harrington Manufacturing's financial reports over the past 3 years, including an undisclosed short-term loan of $900,000, 0 cents that never appeared in the shareholder minutes, and a misvalued contract tied to Nathan Brooks, off by nearly $320,000, 0 cents. They recommended a temporary freeze on all asset expansion decisions and third-party independent auditing. I forwarded the findings to my mother and Clara without commentary. No message, just one line. Refer to section 5.3, page 17. Their lack of response was an admission of their defeat. I didn't respond because they didn't need to know how long I'd been preparing. They only needed to understand that my silence was never surrender. It was the calm before the trigger pulled. By week 3 of the audit, it wasn't a crack anymore. It was a full-blown structural collapse. Peak Pulse's draft spanned 47 pages, with multiple sections flagged in deep red, signaling serious violation. According to the report, over the last 4 years, Harrington Manufacturing had quietly amassed over $2,500,000, 0 cents in debt, primarily from misused funds, shady contracts, and unreported short-term loans. One of the findings stunned me. Part of that debt had once been quietly covered by my own savings, labeled as internal advances, never properly documented. I didn't regret helping. I regretted believing they'd ever acknowledge it. And now there was no one left for them to lean on. Peak Pulse issued an urgent memo to the board. Suspend all expansion investments, freeze all internal credit funds, and submit financial records to the legal authority handling corporate fraud. Lucas broke the news while I was heading to the Phoenix airport for a financial summit. He said, "Emma, it's no longer just an internal audit. This could escalate into a shareholder fraud case." I wasn't surprised. I just asked, "What about Nathan Brooks?" Lucas exhaled. "Looks like they promised Nathan terms well beyond their legal authority. Projected profits, transferable shares. If proven false, he could sue for bad faith and breach of trust. In short, everything they once whispered built on overconfidence and backroom deals was unraveling." Later, I received an email from a former employee, someone I mentored as an intern. Just one sentence. "You were the pillar that kept this company upright. Now they know who the foundation really was." My mother, Elaine, finally called again. It was past midnight. I didn't pick up. Her voicemail was longer than usual, no longer sharp or firm. Her plea was hollow, unable to undo the treachery. "Emma, I know you're angry, but I never thought it would get this far. I need you. If you could just show me how to fix this. You were always the one who kept things under control. I listened, then turned it off, didn't delete it, but didn't reply either." Clara took another route. She posted a long statement on LinkedIn hinting that certain former employees had turned their backs for selfish reasons. The comments split. Half were old allies siding with the family, half were ex-employees who had worked directly with me, and they knew the truth. One wrote, "I worked under Emma. Without her, the North plant would have shut down in 2020. Don't forget that." I didn't need to respond. The truth was speaking for itself, loud and clear. A week later, rumors circulated that Nathan Brooks had hired legal counsel to renegotiate the entire deal, either to pull out or sue. Peak Pulse pressed further, requesting financial logs dating back to 2014. When I was the only one handling the Western branch's budget, a senior finance executive from a global firm sent me a job offer. Attached was a note. My reputation now preceded me, a testament to my silent power. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't rushing to consider it, not because I had doubts, but because I understood this wasn't just a job offer, it was a sign. a sign that I no longer had to play the quiet one behind the scenes, judged by whispers within the family. Outsiders, those who saw through data and results, recognized me more clearly than the people who'd shared my dinner table for nearly 2 decades. I knew from that moment forward, this wasn't just between me and my mother, or between me and Clara. This was the fallout of decisions made under dim lights. Choices they thought no one would trace back, no one patient enough to rewind every step. But there was me. I had kept every receipt, every email, every transaction. Not for revenge, but in case the day came when I'd need them. And that day had come. I didn't start the fire, but when they cut me out, erased my role, silenced my voice, they struck the match themselves. I didn't return to Boulder, not out of anger, not to avoid them, but because I had finally accepted some pieces were never meant to fit back together, not because they broke, but because they never truly belonged. Harrington Manufacturing was no longer mine, and the truth is, it never really was. No matter how many years I gave it, no matter how many dollars I funneled in to patch its wounds, or how many late nights I stayed to audit the numbers, I used to think that if I just tried a little harder, proved myself enough, I'd be accepted as a real part of the family, not by blood, but by worth. My freedom was earned, their control a fading illusion. Now, I live in a small apartment in Phoenix. It's not luxurious or showy, but it's the first space in my life I can truly call my own, untied to obligation, untouched by the legacy others always assumed they understood better than I did. I've accepted a consulting role with a network of women-led startups, partly because the work suits my expertise, but mostly because I want to use my skills to help women like I once was, doing more, carrying more, yet being valued far less. Each morning, I still brew my black coffee, read industry news, and check my email, but my heart doesn't race anymore at the thought of a surprise call from my mother or a message like, "Emma, the East Side plant's down again."